Hi Jenna, can you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Jenna. I'm from California. I'm a student at the dual degree program between UC Berkeley and Sciences Po Paris, and I'm interning with Sahayata this summer.
Okay, could you please tell us why you chose to do this particular internship and why Sahayata out of all organizations?
I really wanted to do something where I could do direct beneficiary work, so I wasn't spending time in an office, but rather out in the field and seeing what the projects actually look like. And I chose Sahayata in particular because Hyderabad has a special place in my heart, and I wanted to be close to family and close to a culture that I was interested in, and in an area that actually requires a lot of social impact work.
Perfect. So, if you could summate your experience in 5 sentences as to how this internship has been, how would you do it?
There are several components of this internship that have made it quite memorable. One is the diversity of demographic I've seen. I've seen several corners of the city. I've seen all different kinds of people that are requiring different services, and I think the variety of field work has allowed me to understand the unique experiences of the majority of individuals living in this area.
Perfect. And you visited almost all our projects in Hyderabad, right? So if you could give an outlook on the education sector, what all the projects you saw and what kind of inferences you made throughout this entire visit to the educational projects.
Yeah, I learned a lot about the Indian education system and some of the faults in that, whether that's government education or private education. The projects that Sahayata runs are extremely important because they focus on closing the gaps in that area, whether that's professional development training for teachers or expanding access to private education for people in lower economic zones. I think I've seen an incredible beneficiary feedback to how this impressive access to education has been for them.
Lovely. And if you could do the same with the healthcare sector, because you visited 2 of our hospitals, right? And one has been newly constructed. So if you could give a brief overview of that as well.
Healthcare is another unique aspect. I learned in these communities there's not a lot of trust and focus around healthcare. People aren't quick to go to hospitals because they practice predatory financial practices, or they just simply don't trust doctors enough to make the initial step to go to a hospital. I think these hospitals, the US hospitals, have been successful because they rely on affordable practice and quality practice. So by word of mouth, new patients have been coming into the hospitals because they know they'll get quality care and they know they won't be overcharged for the services.
Perfect. And if you could say the same for social services and the different social projects that you actually went to, these don't necessarily have like a sustainable outcome, but then they are very necessary, right? So if you could give your understanding, which is I'm sure distinct from the other 2 places that you visited or the sectors. So what are your thoughts on the social service sector?
I think social services are extremely important, especially in an NGO setting, because the government access to social services is limited in the sense where these communities don't necessarily know what resources are available to them, or because they're in very isolated areas, don't actually have access to these resources. So there's not essentially a focus on sustainable models in social services. It's more, can we get people the food, can we get people the education, can we get people the entitlement that they need immediately, rather than waiting for some sort of long-term goal.
Okay, and you saw certain joint collaboration projects such as SAPA, CDPP and Adventure Park. Could you give a brief insight into this as well?
Yeah, these were some of my favorite projects because they were very community-based. They identified a specific community, whether that be Muslim women or young college-age people or researchers, and I think they focused on the community aspect of those different demographics. And they were all very sustainable models in the sense where they are giving resources to a community, they're training a community so that it can be completely self-sustainable and not need to rely on organizations in the long term.
Perfect. So now that you're going to go back to the US and then back to France with this very renewed understanding of what the development sector and the social enterprise field actually is, like what are you going to take back to your academic life?
I think policy work has always been greatly disconnected from work on the ground. Growing up in the West and being educated there, I've always intended to maybe do policy work or social impact work, but not necessarily seeing what it actually looks like. I think a reoccurring visits, reoccurring experience, interaction with direct beneficiaries with project work in the NGO space, it's necessary for me if I want to continue down this path in making that policy or in enacting change in that sector of the world.
Perfect. And what are your 3 major takeaways from this entire internship? Not necessarily just project centric, just general 3 takeaways from this internship.
I think one major takeaway is definitely how you hold yourself in a foreign environment. I've had to face a lot of cultural language barriers and a lot of new settings where you kind of have to prove your capability of being there. So I think I've learned the confidence it takes to be in this kind of work, because you'll constantly be in new places where you maybe don't necessarily connect with the exact culture or exact values of the people you're talking to. A second thing is the intersectionality of women in the NGO space. I think the issues that they face in a very, very male-driven society is extremely unique, and I always feel the need to pay extreme attention to their experiences. The final thing I would say is most of my work was entirely interacting with beneficiaries. The importance of just talking to a beneficiary is invaluable. They're the people who know how well the project is working because their lives depend on how well the project is working. So going into any work done in the future, I think without that policy to ground sort of connection, you can't really know how successful any sort of campaigns are.
Perfect. And the last question is, what would your advice or recommendations be to people who intend to do such an internship with Sahayata Trust? So what do you have to say to prospective interns?
Highly recommend, because number one, the environment I've had here has been truly fantastic. There are plenty of people in this office who will take you on and act as a guide for you. Secondly, if social impact is something you're interested in, there's a million spaces where you can work in an office. It is necessary work, and it was something you learn how to do. I don't think there are millions of spaces that will really walk you through every step of a project building process or how a project kind of plays out in a specific environment. I think a lot of life and building skills should be experience-based, and I think that's what it is. You actually get to see how things are done rather than read them behind a computer or in a book or such. And I think it's a great starting point for entering this line of work.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jenna.
Thank you.